Today, we're going to talk about drinks for fatty liver. Now, why are we talking about fatty liver? Why is that important? Well, your liver, which is one of the largest organs in your body, which is located in your upper right quadrant. It's actually a lot bigger than you think. It goes up really past the bottom of your rib cage. And its primary function is detoxification, but it's also a factory for producing proteins, all sorts of different proteins. You have proteins that carry your cholesterol around your body. You've got hormones. It is a place where we detoxify a lot of the pollutants, but also the natural waste products of metabolism, for example. Your liver is super, super important. So the fact that people have fatty liver is of utmost importance to our metabolic health, as well as the ability of us to ensure that we're not having too much inflammation in our body. Now, the prevalence of liver fat or fatty liver is growing globally. And in fact, we're looking at the latest statistics. It's around 30% of the prevalence of fatty liver is 30%. So that's 1 in 3 of you watching this right now. That's a huge amount. And the issue with fatty liver is that you don't necessarily always get symptoms. So anything above 5 to 10% of your liver being fat is something that can be problematic. And there is a window between those two, the number of 5 to 10% and 30%, where you can't actually see this on imaging. So if I was to put an ultrasound probe onto your right upper quadrant, have a look at your liver, I won't necessarily be able to pick up that you've got a fatty liver until you reach a threshold, which is around 30%. And that's where we see hypoechoic images. So that's where it's a lot whiter, and we can see the sort of glistening effect of the fats in the liver on an ultrasound probe. The other way in which we might diagnose this is through blood tests. So there are certain liver enzymes that you can get on a liver function test that might give us some indication that you've got fatty liver. But again, there is a threshold beyond which those will be raised, and in between you might not actually get any suggestion on that blood panel that you've got a fatty liver. There are other symptoms that are quite non-specific. It could be fatigue. It could be yellowing of the sclera and the whites of your eyes, for example. There can be some other aches and pains that are unexplained. Maybe that is to do with your liver. So when you get excessive fat in your liver, we'll talk about the causes in a second. When you get this excessive fat in your liver, what it can lead to is that inflammatory process that leads to scarring. Ultimately, that can lead to liver cirrhosis, which is the sort of next stage of liver dysfunction, and ultimately liver failure. And then when you have liver failure, that's when you're really not being able to produce those critical proteins, not just for cholesterol, but also for clotting as well. So that's why you have some people who have really, really bad states of liver function where they'll have a little cut and they'll lead to bleeding. It can lead to hemorrhaging and a whole bunch of other problems as well. Now, classically, we used to see liver dysfunction in people who had misuse of alcohol issues. So when you drink excessively, the alcohol is hepatotoxic, so it is uniquely toxic to your liver cells. And when you have this toxicity to your liver cells, that's what can lead to the scarring and the fibrosis and the fat and the sort of classic picture that we see. But what we're seeing more of is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, also abbreviated to NAFLD, N-A-F-L-D. Now, this has a whole host of other causes. Genetics can be one of them, so you can be uniquely susceptible to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease as a result of your genes that you've inherited from mother and father, but it's also uniquely related to obesity. So having excess weight, particularly around the central part of your abdomen, is associated with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. People with excess inflammation, perhaps from gut disorders, they can have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. You can also see this in metabolic syndrome. So metabolic syndrome is this classic picture of a number of different conditions. Insulin resistance, where you are resistant to the hormone insulin that is produced by the pancreas that drives sugar from the bloodstream into your muscle cells and into your liver cells as well. If you have insulin resistance, you need more insulin to have the same desired effect, but that can also lead to more sugar or having more sugar in your bloodstream as well. High amounts of cholesterol, high amounts of triglycerides, these all paint a picture of liver dysfunction or metabolic syndrome that can lead to non-alcoholic fatty liver. But the important thing is, it's not necessarily a disease of people who are obese. You can actually be lean and still have a fatty liver. Now, what is going on here? So essentially, taking a simple example of a person who consumes too many calories and then they have excessive amounts of fat, because you've got to put these calories somewhere. We tend to put them into fat, into our storage molecules. Fats that exist all over our body can be held in subcutaneous fat cells. There can be visceral fat cells, so that's coating around the organs. We also have different types of fats that we have around our thymus and our back. That's called brown fat. That's actually metabolically active fat. That's actually good for us. It's called, sort of has a thermogenic property, so it actually burns calories. So it's actually something that you can train through certain types of exercise, endurance exercise, as well as cold water exposure as well. Actually generates a lot more of these brown fat cells. But we're just talking about having excess amount of calories and actually having to put this into fat cells. What happens is this excess fat, the excess calories and the excess inflammation gets stored in the liver. And when you have this excess storage in the liver, it packages it into fat cells. And over time, if you're consistently eating a lot more foods, particularly refined carbohydrates, high fat foods, it can lead to excessive accumulation of these fat cells in your liver, leading to the process of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. How might someone be diagnosed with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease? Well, generally a good history and examination can reveal whether someone has a high probability of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So if I had a patient come in and I knew that they were drinking a ton of sugary drinks every single day, they had a refined carbohydrate-rich diet, they had a westernized diet that was quite inflammatory, they had a lot more weight, particularly around the abdomen here, I'm hazarding a guess that they've probably got some fat in their liver. You might even find on examination a bit of a bump, a mass here. That could be hepatomegaly, because when you do get excess fat and you get that excess inflammation, your liver can swell as well. And it's something that we describe as hepatomegaly. Now, these are all sort of rough estimates as to whether you do have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. When you do examinations, whether that's an ultrasound, an MRI, that can give you a bit more of a picture as to whether there is a fatty liver there. And those blood tests that I mentioned as well, those liver function tests, if those are elevated, they can be a result of a liver dysfunction. You might also see clotting issues. So a higher amount of time that's required for your blood to clot could be indicative of liver dysfunction as well. This is a really important problem to be aware of because A, so many people suffer with it. B, we know that the prevalence, i.e. the number of cases, is rising. And C, it's very easy to fall into a trap of unhealthy eating habits where you accumulate fat in your liver because of the number of sugar-laden drinks there are, the refined carbohydrates there are in our diet, and the fact that insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome is also increasing as well. So let's talk a bit about drinks specifically that can potentially help with liver fat. There are a number of different drinks that can increase the amount of calories that you burn and also uniquely help with fat in your liver. And the first one is something that I drink very often. It is coffee. Black coffee, coffee without the milk. I'll explain why you don't want to have this with milk. Coffee, as we've talked about many times on the podcast and the YouTube channel, is an incredible product. It is full of different polyphenols. In fact, it is one of the highest polyphenol-rich drinks that we have available to us, other types of things like cacao that's rich in flavonoids. But coffee has these unique compounds called K-walls, it has catechins, it has a chlorogenic acid. And these are not only uniquely antioxidant and anti-inflammatory, they might have specific benefits to liver fat as well. And there have been some studies that have been published in peer-reviewed journals that have demonstrated that regular coffee consumption, so that's coffee pretty much every day, has been associated with a lower risk of liver fibrosis. So you remember I told you about how liver fat has a number of different processes all the way to liver failure. One of the earlier stages is scarring of the liver, or just simple pockets of fat in the liver. Later on, you'll get cirrhosis and fibrosis. So that's where it's sort of set into the liver itself. There is some evidence that patients with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease of that kind of stage could benefit from black coffee in their diet as well. There was a study that found that people who drank more than 2 cups of coffee, and when we say 2 cups, we're generally referring to 2 single espressos per cup. So it's about 4 espressos a day. Or a builder's mug of black coffee, had significantly lower levels of enzymes, liver enzymes that are typically raised in fatty liver disease as well. And they also had reduced risk of liver fibrosis compared to non-coffee drinkers. So these are studies that look at epidemiological evidence. So they're looking at a cohort. They're not necessarily interventional studies, but there is some evidence that there of mechanism behind black coffee having this effect on liver fat itself. We know, like I said, it is a product that can be anti-inflammatory and antioxidant, but we also know that it increases fat oxidation. So one of the reasons why I personally have coffee in the mornings before I train is that it pushes my body into a metabolic stance that actually preferentially burns fat. So this, in my fasted state, with the caffeine that black coffee has, will encourage my body to utilize fat as a fuel and burn that instead of relying on sugar. So this might be one of the reasons as to why this is uniquely beneficial for fatty liver. We also know that black coffee activates thermogenesis. So it increases the number of calories that you will consume and also activates that brown fat as well, that metabolically active fat that, again, sort of turbocharges your body's ability to utilize fat as fuel. So black coffee is definitely something that I would put on the menu for liver fat. Now, I mentioned when drinking coffee, you shouldn't have it with milk. Now, I've got no problem with milk. I think milk is good in certain doses for certain people, as long as you don't have a lactose intolerance. But if you're trying to maximize the benefits of the compounds that we find in coffee, you don't want to be consuming coffee with milk. The reason why is because milk absorbs some of those compounds that are fat soluble. And what will happen is your milk will absorb those fat soluble compounds and it will just go through your digestive tract without actually being absorbed into your bloodstream. So milk and coffee, I tend to have separate unless I really want to enjoy like a beautiful flat white or latte or something like that. If you wanted to use like an almond milk or a cashew milk, for example, as long as it's just like a 3-ingredient, not one with tons of emulsifiers that is actually bad for your gut health, that's totally fine as well. But I would opt for black coffee if you want to try and get some of those benefits to fat oxidation and liver fat as well. You also don't necessarily need to have caffeine. Now, caffeine is very good from an exercise performance stance, which again is another reason why I use caffeinated drinks in the morning, like my black coffee. But you can still get a reasonable number of polyphenols from black coffee that is decaffeinated. The decaffeination method that I prefer is something called Swiss mountain water or mountain water method, because there are other non-Swiss mountain water methods to decaffeinate your coffee. We've done a whole other podcast episode on coffee as well, so check out that as well. So you don't necessarily need to have it caffeinated. You can have the decaffeinated versions. Just a quick one. If you're enjoying this kind of content, you will love our free newsletter called Eat, Listen, Read. Every week, I send you a recipe that you'll absolutely love, something to listen to, something to read, sometimes something to watch, less than 3 minutes, and it will help you have a healthful, happier week. You can find that in the link down below. On to another caffeinated product, green tea. That is the second drink that I think is fantastic for people who are looking to improve fatty liver. Green tea has many derivations, and actually tea in general is very good for fatty liver because it has these products like catechins. Now, there is one particular polyphenol in green tea called EGCG, that is epigallocatechin gallate, ECGC. Now, you see these in supplemental forms. I highly recommend you don't necessarily get it from supplements, you get it from the whole foods themselves, or the whole drinks in this case, because there are likely going to be an entourage of other chemicals and other compounds that you find that are unique to teas that are having a synergistic effect. That's to say that in combination, they're having this anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effect. We also know that green tea has this effect on your brown fat. So it activates that brown fat and increases thermogenesis, makes you slightly hotter, and increases your fat burning capacity as well. So green tea is really an umbrella term for lots of different teas. There's matcha, which is very popular in Japan, where they'll pulverize the dried green tea leaves into a product that can be mixed with hot water and consumed whole. So you're actually getting a massive amount of the polyphenols that are found in tea, and nothing's going to waste. You're not just getting the soluble compounds that you find in the leaves themselves that are not just steeped and you take the water, you're taking absolutely everything. But oolong tea, there's sencha, there are even Darjeeling. So there are so many different types of teas that you find in different parts of Asia. And in parts of Darjeeling, there's first flush, second flush, that corresponds with the time of harvesting and when they harvest. And there are so many different plains where they harvest different types of teas at different altitude that actually deliver these different polyphenols. So I'd really get into tea if I were you. If you didn't like coffee for the taste, you found it too bitter, tea is a lovely alternative. It's mildly caffeinated, so it doesn't necessarily have the jitteriness effect of coffee. And another reason why might be because of some other amino acids that teas contain, like L-theanine. L-theanine is shown in supplemental form to be anti-anxiolytic, so it can actually improve the jitteriness, and that might be why, even though some teas have high levels of caffeination, it doesn't have the same negative consequences to people who are uniquely susceptible to caffeine in coffee. Now, the effects of green tea on non-alcoholic fatty liver disease have been demonstrated in some studies. There was a study that showed that consuming green tea extract for 12 weeks significantly reduced liver fat and improved liver enzymes. So there's ALT and AST. These are just two of the liver enzymes that we look at on a blood panel. And there is a suggestion that there's a potential therapeutic effect for managing fatty liver. Again, I would also say you don't want to be having these types of teas with milk. Not only are they not suggested to be consumed with milk, so if you talk to a tea purist, they will always say loose leaf tea with milk is an absolute crime. So always have your tea separate, particularly if you're spending lots of money on like a Darjeeling or a loose leaf oolong tea or a sencha tea. Always have it just plain with a little bit sweetener if you prefer, but you want to have it plain without milk for the same reasons. Those fat-soluble polyphenols can be absorbed by the milk and then taken through your digestive tract without necessarily being absorbed into the bloodstream. So you want to make sure that you're separating it for those reasons, so you're getting the most bang for your buck. Another drink that we've talked about in the past is beetroot juice. Now, beetroot juice is wildly antioxidant. It has tons of anti-inflammatory properties. We also know that it's a really, really concentrated source of nitrates, which is why it has those potential benefits to heart health and brain health. But it also contains betaine, and betaine is another plant chemical that we know is anti-inflammatory and antioxidant as well. And this may have unique benefits for your liver. There was a study that showed that beetroot juice consumption significantly reduced liver fat, liver inflammation, and lipid accumulation in animal models of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Now, we have to be careful whenever we look at animal studies because you can't necessarily extrapolate that to a human population. However, there is a lot of mechanistic evidence, and beetroot juice, we know through other studies, does have a beneficial effect on human physiology. If not just for the brain and heart benefits, there may be some benefits to our livers as well. So even though the evidence is still out there, I would say that beetroot juice may be something that you might want to consider for fatty liver, for the prevention of fatty liver, and potentially improvement of fatty liver as well, as we already know that it has anti-inflammatory benefits. The fourth thing, again, we've talked about this quite a bit as well, is ginger. So ginger has a unique set of different plant chemicals like gingerols and shagols that, again, have the same properties. They are antioxidant, they are anti-inflammatory, and generally anything that is uniquely anti-inflammatory in our body is going to be beneficial for fatty liver because of that mix of inflammation, that sort of toxic milieu of all those different chemicals that can be created when we have too much fat in our liver. The way that I would personally have ginger in a drink is powdered ginger in hot water and just quickly mix. Not only is this really, really convenient, but you get a specific type of gingerol or a ginger polyphenol called shagol. So there are different types of plant chemicals that you find in ginger, and the dried variety has more of this particular chemical that might be beneficial for inflammation. You can certainly have fresh ginger, like fresh ginger shots, for example, blended and pulverized. So you're getting not just those water-soluble chemicals, but you're also getting some of the fiber as well. That also might be something to take. With ginger, because it is quite, in Ayurvedic terms, heat promoting, you do want to be careful of the thermogenic properties, the genuine thermogenic properties of it. Excessive consumption of ginger can actually lead people to have heart palpitations and an increased rate of their heart in general. So don't go overboard with any of these drinks, really, particularly with ginger, because there are some side effects that have been noted in the literature. But a powdered ginger drink and hot water taken every day could be beneficial for fatty liver as well. On the subject of taking too many of any of these drinks, I'd also have the same precautions with caffeinated drinks like coffee and tea as well. So the literature suggests anywhere between 2 to 3 cups, but anything more than that might be detrimental. And I'd also titrate this against your own subjective intuition about your caffeine tolerance. So if you know that if you're going to have a cup of coffee or a couple of cups of coffee and it causes your heart rate to increase, or you feel a little bit unsettled or anxious, then perhaps you want to go for a decaffeinated version, or you want to opt for another type of drink instead. Another drink that contains one of my favorite compounds is tomato juice, and it contains lycopene. So tomato juice, I'm not really a fan of juices in general, actually. I prefer people to go for either the whole food itself or a smoothie. But in this case, because tomatoes are generally quite low in sugar, a juice form of it that extrapolates a lot of the lycopene, this unique antioxidant that is novel to tomatoes, is not necessarily a bad thing. I'd obviously, ensure that you're being cautious about the quality of the brand that you're taking. It's not tomato concentrate, it's actually whole tomato juice, and it's not been mixed in with fillers and sugars and all this unnecessary sort of additives that we have in many of these products. And if you can make it yourself, that would be ideal. But tomato juice might be beneficial for your liver fat. Now, there have been studies looking at lycopene supplementation, and they've showed that it significantly reduced liver fat accumulation and improved liver enzymes, again, in those with NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Extrapolating a lycopene supplement study to tomato juice does have its problems. However, we know that hydration is very important. We also know that a high amount of lycopene in a tomato juice could be beneficial. As a drink that someone should be choosing over, let's say, a sugar-sweetened beverage, for example, or something that has a lot of sugar in, not necessarily a pop drink, maybe something like a cordial. This is something that I would you more towards. The added benefit of having that lycopene could also reduce inflammation, also has that antioxidant effect as well, could be good for your liver. So tomato juice, for me, is one of those that I think would be good for if you're looking for a drink alternative to just simple water. On the subject of hydration, water might actually be something that is beneficial for fatty liver in a little bit of a roundabout way. So we know that overconsumption of calories that can lead to excess weight, which can lead to excess fat accumulation around our body and also in our liver, is probably one of the upstream causes of fatty liver in the first place. Water consumption and ensuring that you're having enough water can improve your satiety levels. So if you're more satiated, i.e. you feel full because you've had water in your stomach, it expands your stomach, sends a signal to your brain to say, hey, I've had enough to eat here, I'm satiated, I'm fine. That can overall lead to less calorie consumption, ergo less fat going into your liver. So that's one way in which ensuring that you're having enough water, you're hydrated enough, can prevent liver fat accumulation in the first place. There is a suggestion that putting lemon in the water might be even better. Now, why might that be? Well, vitamin C that we have in citrus fruits, that's highly concentrated in things like lemons, limes, even grapefruit juice, not only has the vitamin C, but it also has those other citrus bioflavonoids that are, again, anti-inflammatory and anti-inflammation. You're probably sensing a pattern here of the kind of drinks that I'm suggesting. These might be uniquely beneficial for liver fat as well. There have been some studies looking at vitamin C supplementation. Again, we're extrapolating a supplementation study for vitamin C in a drink. So there are limitations and that can be problematic as well. But we do know that these kind of citrus bioflavonoids are anti-inflammatory. And if you are looking for a drink that might have that added benefit, that might just keep you, thinking that, training your taste buds to appreciate the bitter tones, might have this anti-inflammatory effect on your liver, it's worth a shot. Not only will you be hydrating yourself, but you'll be replacing what you might be having otherwise, which could be a sugar-sweetened beverage that would not be good for your liver fat accumulation. So something to try. Squeeze of grapefruit, squeeze of lemon juice, squeeze of lime in some water, ensuring that you're hydrated properly. Could also reduce your hunger, which could lead to less accumulation of fat in your liver through overconsumption of calories. Coffee is one of the healthiest things that you can drink every single day. You'll find out about the real benefits of why drinking coffee is important for diabetes and healthy aging by clicking on the video right there.